In this tutorial, we're going to take a detailed look at how to create and edit text within the software. So let's start by opening a new copy of the software and creating a new file, and we're going to specify a job size of 20 inches by 20 inches, and our XY datum is going to be in the lower left. We're going to be working in inches. Once we've got all that information, just press OK. Now we're going to be working with all the text tools for this tutorial. So these can all be found under the Create Vectors section. So we've got the Draw Text tool, we've got the Draw Text within a Vector Box tool, we've got Edit Text Spacing and Curve, we've also got Convert Object to Curves and Wrap Text along a curve. We're also going to be using the Distort Selected Objects tool as well. So to start with, we're going to be using the Draw Text tool. So if you just navigate over to this icon here and then just click on that, this will then present you with the Create Text form. So if we start at the top, this would be our text box. This is where we enter any text that we'd like to create. So if we wanted to get stuck right in there, we could just simply type in some text like Vectric, and without changing any of the actual options, I'm just going to go ahead and just click into our work area. And as you can see, that's created the text on screen for us. If we had a large amount of text, so say if we were wanting to copy and paste some text that we'd created in another text creation program, we could just simply highlight it all and copy, and then come into this larger edit box and just paste from the right click menu. We can also right click into the smaller edit box as well and paste any text that we may have. Once we're happy with the text we've got in our text field, we can go ahead and choose our font. So in the software, we've got the choice of two different types of fonts. We've got true type fonts and single line fonts. The true type fonts are any fonts that come pre-installed with Windows, or fonts that we may have installed into Windows. If you found a font that you like that's not available currently in your system, you can use the Windows Help function to guide you through installing that font. And the other type of font we've got is the single line font. Now these are fonts that we've installed with the software package. So to start with, we'll start with the true type font. So to select a font, we simply come to the drop down box that's just below, and we click on the arrow, and that will then give us the full list that's available to us. So if we know a font that's installed into Windows that we want to use, like Arial, with the drop down open, we can simply just start to type the name of the font. So if I wanted Arial, I could start just typing A-R-I-A-L, and as you can see, it's found the font that we want to use. So all we'd have to do then is hit enter on the keyboard, and that'll then select that font. If we just wanted to quickly demo this, we could just simply press apply, and that'll then change that font type to Arial. If we were creating text for engraving purposes, we may want to use a single line font. So if we just come up to the font type selection and we just select the single line button, this will then give us a drop down for all the pre-installed single line fonts that we have. So again, we can use the same method to find them. So if I wanted to say the avant-garde, I could just start to type. So I'm just going to type A, and that's brought us to the A section. Or I could go back to the Helvetica font, so I could just type H and then press enter. And then to apply this, we just simply come down to the bottom of the form and click the apply button, and that will then change that font to a single line font. Now these are great for when you say you're going to use a conical engraving tool, as you can simply just create a profile toolpath which then goes as deep as you specify along the vectors. And this really does produce a fast and efficient way for creating text for engraving purposes. For this though, I'm going to go back to using a true type font, and I'm going to just click apply just to change that back to, so it's going to go to the Times New Roman font. When we're happy with the font that we've selected, we can then go ahead and look at our other options. So I may want to make our text bold, so I can just tick that box there and click apply. I also may want to make it italic, so I can just check that box as well and click apply. We may also want to adjust where the text alignment is. Now this is all down to our anchor point. So the anchor point is where we actually clicked into our work area, and that's picked that up there with the X and Y values. And we may just want to just adjust that with these buttons here. So I can just check the justification of all of those. I'm just going to stick with our center text alignment, and we may even want to extend the height of these. So I may just want to have from 2.5 inches to 3 inches in height. So I'm just going to specify that there. And when we feel that we're happy with the text that we've got, we can simply click apply and then close. Now I might just want to just further center this, so I can just simply click the F9 key to center that. As with any text that we create using the Draw Text tool, the software will treat this entity as a text object, and that will allow us to make further edits to the text by using any of the text manipulation tools, until we come to a point where we're satisfied with what we've got, and we then convert the actual text object to standard vectors. So to demonstrate this, with the text still selected, I'm going to go back into the Draw Text tool, and as you can see, the software knows that I want to edit the text for Vectric. So I may want to just add a new line to this, so I may just press enter and type software underneath, and then click apply. I may not like the look of the text being in bold or italic, so I may just uncheck those boxes and click apply. Now this just demonstrates the usefulness of the software, remembering that it's a text object so that we can then make further edits to that. So I'm just going to click close, and I'm actually just going to delete the text that I've created at the moment, as next we're going to demonstrate the tool for drawing text within a vector box. Now as the name suggests, we do require to have some sort of box created so that we can then fit the text within. So if we come to the create vectors and select the draw rectangle tool, I'm just going to create a rectangle of 16 inches in the width and 6 inches in height, and just click create and close. And we're just going to select our rectangle and just center that with the F9 key on the keyboard. With it highlighted, we can then go over to the draw text within a vector box and just click that, and we can just specify some text within this text box here. So I'm just going to put Vectric new line software for CNC, and going to keep these the same and just click apply. And as you can see, that the software has fitted the text that we specified as best as it can in the box that we selected. So again, we can still make the edits that we did last time, so we can change the font, we can make the text bold or italic, we can also change the alignment of the text to left, right or center. The bounding box dimensions are picked up from the actual rectangle that we created and selected before entering this tool. We can actually override these now if we wanted to, so we could change the width and height for the box that we're actually going to fit the text into. We can also add a margin or change the margin of the text that's been applied at the moment. So I could opt for no margin, and that will then stretch the text between the top of the box and the bottom of the box. I could also specify a wide margin, so that's going to give us more of a margin on top and bottom, or I could just opt for the normal margin. We can also opt to have a vertical stretch or a horizontal stretch. Now at the moment, as you can see, that we're okay for the vertical space, but we may also want to make use of the horizontal space that we've got through here, so we could stretch the text that we've got selected. So we can do this by any of the three ways. So we may want to stretch the spaces in between the characters or stretch the kerning. For this, we're just going to stretch the characters, so if we just select that option and press apply, that will then stretch the characters within the margins that we've got specified here. So as you can see, this is quite a useful way of constraining text within a boxed area. This is quite useful for people that may want to make plaques or sign makers. So I'm just going to go ahead and just close this now, and I'm just going to go ahead and just select all my vectors and text and just delete those. As the next tool that we're going to be looking at is the edit text spacing and curve option, but for this we just need to quickly just add some more text. So let's go to the draw text and let's just quickly just type in here Vectric and space and then software, and I'm just going to take the defaults for this and just click apply and close, and then it's going to hit F9 to center that. So the way the software actually creates the text is all down to the rules of the individual fonts. So you may find that the spacing in between individual letters is not equal to each other, and you also may find that the heights of each of the characters are also not equal to each other. And that's all down to the actual individual fonts. Now we can use the edit text spacing and curve option to actually edit these to our own liking. So with this text still selected, I'm just going to come over and select the edit text spacing and curve option, and then we can come back over to our text, and you'll notice that the actual icon for the mouse is changing. So when it's like this, we can simply just edit the spacing in between each of the characters. So the way to do this is simply come between two of the characters and just simply left mouse click to bring the characters closer together, or if you hold shift on the keyboard and click with the left mouse button, we'll then send those further apart. If we knew that we needed bigger spaces in between these characters, or we wanted to dramatically reduce the space in between each of these characters, we can then also hold the control key. So if I wanted to dramatically reduce the size in between the V and the E here, I would simply just hold the control button down and just click once. As you can see, that's brought them quite close together now. But if I wanted to send them quite far apart, I'd hold the control and shift key down and then click, and that'll then send them further apart. And we just keep doing this till we're actually satisfied by the actual overall look. So just to go over this again, a single mouse click in between two characters will decrease the space by a small increment, and if we hold shift on the keyboard and click, that will increase the space by a small increment. If we wanted to dramatically increase or decrease the space in between characters, we'd simply add the holding down of the control key as well. So I'm going to hold the control key down and shift and click. Now that's going to dramatically increase the space in between two characters. And if I wanted to dramatically decrease the space by a larger increment, I'd just simply hold the control key down and then click with the left mouse button. As well as editing the spaces in between each of the characters, we can also edit the line spacing. So if we just hover the mouse in between the two lines, you'll see that the cursor will change. And the same rules apply, so we can just simply click once to decrease the space, hold the shift key to increase the space, and the same goes for if we also hold the control button. So you'll find this feature really useful, especially when editing spacing in between characters like this where the serifs are quite close together. So a simple few clicks will just sort that out so it visually looks more natural flowing. And as you can see, like the gaps in between the W and the A are actually quite a lot, so you may just want to bring those closer together and A and R further apart. So as you can see, it's really quite easy to sort out the look of the text that you're creating. Another thing that we could do if our text was single lines, we could actually also, in this same tool, edit the actual curvature of each text block. So what we can do is we can split this current text block, which contains two lines, and just right click and break these text block into separate lines. So if you just right click and then just select that, we can then select each of the lines as individual text entities. And you'll also notice that now every time we select a different line of text, we do have these new nodes available. Now the center white node allows us to drag around the text around the screen, whilst the other two green nodes are used for adding some curvature to our text. So the top one will allow us to add a curve going upwards, and the bottom node will allow us to add a curve going down. Again, because we're editing the text, if we do add a curve, you'll notice that the spacing between each of the characters is also going to change. So you'll notice that if you look at the mouse pointer, we can still actually edit the text spacing in between each of the characters. So if I felt that I needed to bring in some of the characters close together, I can still do that. Or if I wanted to make them further apart, I can do that also. Now whilst editing the spacing between each of these characters, you may have already noticed that we've got 4 new nodes. Now we've got 2 red and 2 blue. Now the red ones allow you to move the text along the curve that it's currently sitting on. So we can do that by simply coming over the node, holding down the left mouse button and just dragging the mouse across the screen. As you'll see, that'll allow us to move the text along the curve. We can also do this by holding the control button down and the left mouse button. That will allow us to move in 15-degree increments, as you can see. The blue node allows us to edit the actual radius that the arc that the text is currently sitting on. So if I just quickly drag, and you'll see that the radius that the text is currently sitting on will dramatically change until the point that it gets to a full circle. So as you can see, we've got plenty of options to actually edit the text on the curve, its radius that it sits on, and also the spacing in between all of the characters. Now, an important thing to note is before we actually get this far into editing the spacing and the curvature to our text, we need to make sure that the actual text content and the font that we actually want to use is correct. Because if we go back to edit the actual text, so if I go back into the Draw Text tool and I select our curved text that we've edited and individually change the spacing in between each of these characters, if I simply went to edit any of these options here and then click apply, we would lose any of the formatting that we'd already done with adding a curve or any of the spacing in between each of the characters. So if I just added in LTD on the end of this and then clicked apply, you'll see that we've now lost the curvature and the spacing in between each of the characters. So that's why it's really important to make sure that when we are originally creating our text, that all the options that we specify here are all the ones that we definitely want to proceed with then editing the text with. If we found for some reason that we'd made these edits inadvertently, so that we'd then lost the curvature and all the spacing that we'd happen to have done to our text, we can just simply use the software's undo function. So we can use this button here, or you can use the standard Control and Z, and that will then bring back the last state that the text was in before we made the last edit. And we can keep doing this to undo every state that we'd changed to the text using the text editing tools here. So if you imagine now that we'd exhausted the use of all our text editing tools that we've used so far, and we now may want to just use the tools that are available to us if these were standard vectors, what we can do is we can use this tool here to convert the object to curves. So by doing this, it no longer stays as a text entity, it now is all individual vectors that we can select individually, as you can see. So if I actually tried to highlight all the text there that you can see and then try to edit that with the Draw Text tool as we've done previously, you'll notice that the software no longer treats this as a text object. In doing this though, we have actually enabled the options now to actually edit this like it was a standard vector. So I can select it individually, so I may want to just turn that into transform mode and adjust the size so that the S is much bigger than the rest of the letters, which we wouldn't be able to do in any of the other tools while it was still text. And we can also use the node editing mode, so I could simply just press N on the keyboard and we could then just add a point here, for instance, in the midway point of this span, so I could just press I to insert a point. I could then just drag that out. I could even smooth that point by pressing S on the keyboard and then adding some curvature to this part of the S here. So for instance, if I had finished editing this by going into edit mode, and I could then press escape on the keyboard and then come back out. Again, if we felt like we needed to go back to actually editing this as a text object, we can again use the software's undo button, which will undo the states that one by one which we've actually applied to the text. So at the moment you'll still see that it's in vector state, and now it should be text again. So we can just confirm that by, for one, it's got a solid pink outline when I've just clicked on one of the actual characters. But if I go back into the actual Draw Text tool, we'll see that the software now recognises that as a piece of text that it can edit. Some of the functions in the software require us not to have overlapping vectors. This is especially true when it comes to toolpathing. However, sometimes this cannot be helped, and this can be down to the type of font that we may be using. So for instance, if I've got software selected here, and I'll go back to the Draw Text tool, if I just go to select a font that represents, say, like handwriting, where the characters are all joined up, so like brush script should be one of them. If I just select that, and then I'm just going to change the height to 4 inches, and then I'll click apply, we'll see that this type of font is where the characters will join up with the tails to the beginning and end of each of the characters. This is where the overlapping can be quite a problem. Now there are things that we can do in the software to actually overcome this. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is first of all transform the actual text to curves. So again, we just use this option here with the text selected, and that'll then change the text to individual vectors. Now what we want to do, as you can see if we zoom in a little bit, is that because these vectors are overlapping, and some of the actual toolpaths, like say V-carving, if we were going to V-carve this text out, require one continuous vector to cut in between. What we might want to do is actually weld these characters together. So if I just zoom to fit and select all the outer vectors of the text that are joined together, not selecting the inner vectors, we can then weld these characters together to form one continuous vector, which would be good if we wanted to V-carve these. So with them selected, I'm going to come over to the Weld Selected Vectors option, and as you can see, that's now removed any of the overlapping joins that were between in each of the individual characters. The only problem we may have here is that in between some of the letters where the joins weren't perfect, like say in between the A and the R here, we may have a bit of a kink in the middle. So what we can do is we can go into node editing mode and then just further edit the text. So if I go here, and then what I can do is I can just simply hover over the nodes and just simply delete those. So that when we do zoom out, that to the eye, it looks perfect. So if I just press escape and F on the keyboard to zoom to fit. So it's just important to understand that if we do require our vectors not to be overlapping, there are tools available and methods that we can use to overcome that to then get, say, the text that we want to V-carve for our product. So the next thing that we're going to look at is actually wrapping text along a curve. So first of all, I'm just going to highlight all of the text and vectors that's on my screen by pressing Ctrl and A, and then I'm going to hit the delete key just to remove those. I'm going to go back into the Draw Text tool just to give me some text to work with. So I'm just going to type software in there, and I'm going to use the Arial font. Just going to give that a sensible height, so around 2 inches is fine, and then I'm going to close that and press F9 to center that. Now I've got my text, I'm just going to create myself a simple curve. So to do this, I'm going to go to the Draw Curve tool, and I'm just going to plot 4 points so I can create myself a shallow wave, and I'm just going to press the right mouse button to deselect and accept my line. And from here we can simply just go over to the option to wrap text along a curve. All we need to do is simply just select our text, and that will then enable all the options for us to then manipulate this text here to wrap that along this wavy line here. So if I just click apply, just to apply the defaults, that should then wrap this text along the curve. Now at the moment it's come through as upside down, and the reason for that is because at the moment the text on the other side option is checked. So if I just uncheck that, it should now put that the correct way. So at the moment, as you can see, that the text position is on the curve, so that's where you can see that the text has been bisected by the actual line itself. So we can do that either above the curve or even below the curve. You've seen the option for the text on the other side. We can also select an offset distance for our text. So for instance, I could offset the text from the line, say by 1/2 inch. So that'll then just add a 1/2 inch distance between the text and the line. I can even add a minus distance for the offset, so that then it will take that below 1/2 inch. I'm just going to put that back to 0. The other options that we have available to us is the actual text alignment for the text on the actual curve. So at the moment it's in the middle. If I select to align it to the left, it'll align to the left and right to the right, as you can see. Every time we do this, you can actually see that the spacing in between each of the characters is also changing. So if you look here, the W and the A is actually crossing over each other here. So, and another option that we have available to us is actually how the letters sit on the actual line. So at the moment we've got a line to curve, so each of the characters is rotating round dependent on where the actual line is going at the present moment in time. However, if I actually opted to select that all the characters are kept vertical, then just the height of the actual letters will change, as you can see. So I'm just going to put that back to align to curve. Other options that we've got are text spacing, so we can adjust the text spacing so that we can fill the whole line like that by extending the text spacing, or we can even select this option here to scale the text to fully fill the space available on the line, like so. So let's say, for instance, I'm happy with where the text is on the line at the moment, but I just want to edit the individual spacing in between all the characters. I'm not able to do that on this tool here, so what I can do is I can click close and I can go back to the option to edit text spacing and curve, and that will then allow me to then select the text and actually individually edit all of the spacing in between the actual text characters along still on the curve. So I may want to just increase the spacing between the T and the W there, decrease it between the F and the T. I definitely want to maybe even do a large jump between the W and the A, so I'm going to hold Control and Shift and press for these. And I can do this up until when I'm actually happy with what I can see on the screen. So when we're finished, we need to simply come over to the selection mode arrow, and next I'm going to demonstrate how to align text around a circle, which is quite a common thing when we want to do signs or badges, etc. So I'm just going to highlight the text and the curve, and I'm just going to simply just press the delete button on the keyboard. And the first thing I'm going to do is create our circle. So I'm just going to come to the draw circle tool. I'm going to specify a diameter of 10 inches and press create and close. I'm going to select it and then center that in the center by pressing F9. And then I'm going to go ahead and create ourselves some text. So again, come to the draw text tool. I'm just going to type in all in capitals Vectric on one line, and another line I'm going to type in software. I'm going to keep the Arial font, and I'm going to keep the rest of the options and just click apply and close, and again F9 to center our text. So the first thing I want to do with our text is first of all split it into lines so they're their own text entity. So I'm just going to right click over the text and select to break the text block into lines, and then I'm just going to select that and turn it into transform mode just to move that up, and same again with the software. Just going to move that down out the way. So when it comes to wrapping text along a circle, or any closed object for that matter, there's no real way for the software or us to determine where we actually want to put our text and where we want to actually start wrapping our text. So I know that I want this text to wrap along the top of this curve, and I know that I want the software to wrap along the bottom. And the way the actual wrapping text along a curve option actually works is it starts from the actual start point of the circle. So if I just deselect our text and I select our circle and then go into node editing mode by selecting the letter N on the keyboard, we'll notice that the actual start point of our circle is at the top here. So it will start there and go round like so. So if I actually went to do that now, our text wouldn't actually start until here, so it would start from there and go round. And if we specified to have it in the center, it's likely going to end up on the bottom, facing upside down as well. So when we do find ourselves in a predicament like this, the best thing to do is actually cut the vector up into parts where we can actually then alter the start and end positions. So for this, I know that, like I said, we want to have the Vectric going along the top of the curve there, from this point to this point, and the software in the center from this point to this point. So it makes sense for us to cut this circle into two arcs in the center here. So to do that, we just simply hover over a node, press the right click button, and select to cut the vector. And if you notice that we also had a shortcut key of the letter C on the keyboard. So that then leaves us now with two vectors, one with the start point going from right to left, and the other with a start point and direction of left to right. So I'm just going to exit the node editing mode now by pressing escape on the keyboard, and I'm going to wrap the software around this curve here. So I'm just going to highlight the text software and then the curve along the bottom, and then come to the wrap text along a curve option, and I'm simply just going to press apply. And as you can see at the moment, that's facing the right way, so it's going from left to right. It's on the inside of the curve, so I actually want it on the, below the curve, so I'm just going to select this option here. I may want to just edit the text spacing a little bit, just to bunch them together a bit more. So I may want to just lower that. And when I'm happy with that, I can then go ahead and press close and then start on the next one. So again, let's select the curve and select Vectric. And this time, if you remember that we said that the start point was over this side and it's facing that direction and the end point's here. So if I go to press apply now, I'm going to expect my text to be the wrong way around, like so. So there's two options that we've got here. We can either go back into node editing and we can then change the start position of the actual vector, or we can use this option here to put the text on the other side, which essentially reverses the direction of the vector that we've selected. So like so, and then I can just simply select the above curve option there. Again, it's important to note, just like the edit text spacing and curve option, that any changes that we do make to the text now, all of the formatting that we've just done will be lost. So if I go back into the draw text tool and I select our text, and I just make a simple edit, so let's say I just change it to lowercase and I click apply, that you'll see straight away that we've lost formatting along the curve that we just did. So it's essential to keep in mind that anything that we do specify here, we must make sure that we're 100% happy with it before we go ahead and make further edits to it with the other text tools. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this form, and I'm going to highlight everything again and press delete. So we're going to create another bit of text. So again, go back to draw text. I'm just going to type in Vectric again. I have a height of 3 inches, and I'm going to have Arial as the font, and I'm going to click apply, close, and F9 to center our text. So as with normal vectors, we can take these into transform mode as well. So while it's selected once, we can simply just select it again, and that will then take the text into transform mode. And we can use it in exactly the same way. So the center point will allow us to drag the text around our screen. We can also use these node points to actually resize our text in different directions. We can also hold the shift key down, which will then allow us to resize our text from the center point. So holding shift and dragging will resize that from the center, like so. We can also use the dark blue nodes around the edge of our transformation nodes, which will allow us to then rotate our text. So I can rotate it that way, I can move it, and I can then carry on editing and transforming the look of our text. To take this a step further, we could even then go and use the Distort Selected Objects tool. So I'm just going to go back and undo all the transformations that I've made until I get what we've got now on screen. So with the text selected, I'm going to go straight into the Distort Selected Objects tool, and I'm going to see what options are available to us. So I can see that the first option that it gives us is the bounding box option, and it's actually given us a tick to let us know that the selected vectors that we've got, or our text that we've got at the moment, is valid, and we can go ahead and start the distortion. So I'm going to simply click apply, and you'll notice that it's given us a bounding box around our text. Now this bounding box works in the same way as any normal vectors, and as you can see we've got the node points up at the moment and our midpoints, so that means we can even node edit this box to make further distortions. So if I can just come over this node here and select it, and I can just jog that up with the keyboard, and you'll notice that the vectors have all been distorted to match the actual volume of that box. So I'm going to select this one as well. I'm just going to jog this one down. As with node editing, we can simply also, when we see the icon with this little squiggly icon underneath the mouse, we can right click and we can choose to change the span to a Bezier span, or we can change it to an arc, or we can choose to insert a point. So I'm just going to insert a point there, and then maybe just manually drag that with my mouse to up here. And again, as you can see, that we are allowed to use the keyboard shortcut, so I can simply just hover over a span and just press the letter I on the keyboard to insert another point, and maybe just drag that one again up like that. Again, we can take advantage of the midpoint, so I could just come over to a midpoint and simply press the letter I on there to change that to a point. So I can jog that up and change this one to a point as well. I may want to smooth this point, so I may want to just insert the point and then select to smooth the point. So I may want to just move that and add some curvature. And I may want to just go around and manually change all of these to smooth points by using the shortcut S on the keyboard. So when we've finished adding our smooth points, we can then use the handles to then add some curves to our text. And you'll notice straight away that the text is being distorted between our bounding box as we do it. Now when using the Distort Object tool, there is something that we do need to take note of. So let's just say I'm happy with the distortion that I've got at the moment. I can simply just click close. You will notice that we no longer have the solid outline of the text that we had before we went to distort it. So if we just deselect it and select it, you'll notice that it's still being selected all as one object essentially, but it's not being selected as text. As we can tell, if we went back to try and edit it as text, it's no longer classed as a text object. What has happened is that since using the Distort tool has then saved the actual object from standard text to a state of distortion. This then allows us to go back into the Distorted Objects tool and then reapply any distortion that we want. And we can do this by using the edit envelope, which will then allow us to go back into the exact distortion that we'd created. To save our distortion and actually transform it back into regular vectors, we'd need to use this button here, which is to bake the distortion. So if we use that option, then press close, we'll notice that each of these have now become their own regular single vectors. Another thing that we can do with the Distort Selected Objects tool is actually to distort the text between two curves. So I'm just going to highlight everything and just delete, and I'm just going to recreate the text that we did have. So I'm just going to type that in there, close, and F9 to center that. I'm then just going to move the text just down to the bottom. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create just some simple arcs. So I'm going to use the through three parts. I'm just going to just draw the points, and I'm just going to do just a shallow arc, so about there. And then I'm just going to use the mirror function just to mirror that selected object. So I'm just going to flip it about the job center. I am going to create a mirrored copy, and I'm also going to flip it vertically. So now I have all my parts that I need to distort the text between these two curves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the Distort tool. I'm going to first of all select my text, and then going to shift and select the bottom line, and then I'm going to shift and select the top line. And then I'm going to select this option here to distort between two curves, and as you can see, the software has agreed by giving us the little green tick symbol that our selection is valid, and we can then simply just press OK. And now that we've clicked apply, the distort tool automatically sends us to the edit envelope, which now means we can then edit the distortion of the text without it actually affecting any of the curves. So I could just simply drag these down like so, or up for instance. And this is handy obviously if we were going to use vectors on work that we were doing. We didn't actually want to make any edits to the vectors, we just wanted to use them to distort between. So I'm just going to close this, and then I'm going to undo the operations that we've just performed. We can also use this tool option to then distort between more varied curves. So we may want to go into node edit and then maybe transform this into a Bezier span, and then maybe even insert a point here, and then use the control points to add some curves to this. So I'm going to escape from the node editing, and I'm just going to highlight this curve and press delete. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this curve, and I go to the mirror selected objects tool. I'm going to then flip vertically, then going to take off flip about job center. I'm not going to create a mirrored copy, and I'm just going to flip horizontally. And now we've got this interesting wave that we can then distort the text between. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the text, shift and select the bottom wave, and then shift and select the top one. Go to the distort selected objects tool, and then select the between two curves option and click apply. Now as you can see, that has distorted the text in between those two curves, but it has done it in a fashion that we would class as being backwards. And the reason for this is because the start point of this line here is running from right to left. So the only way we can really edit that is by coming out of the distort tool, undoing what we've just done, so coming up to the undo button, and then what we can do is we can select the line, go into node editing by selecting N on the keyboard, and making this point here the start point by hovering over the node, right clicking and making start point. After we've done that, we can escape the node editing, again select the text, shift and select the bottom line, and then shift and select the top line, go back into the distort selected objects tool, select to distort between the two curves, and then click apply. And this time you'll see that because the start point is now here and it's thrown from left to right, so is our text. Again, while we're in the edit envelope, we can go ahead and actually distort the text manually without actually affecting the vectors that we've used to actually distort between. So I'm just going to go ahead and bake this distortion. And that now brings us to the finish of this tutorial. So we've covered quite a lot during this tutorial. So we've covered how to initially create our text, and then to edit the text spacing and curve. We've also learned how to convert any text that we've got into standard vectors. We've also learned how to wrap text along a curve, and lastly we learned how to distort our text between two lines and even in a bounding box. So that concludes this tutorial. Thanks for watching.